There you go.
Welcome everybody to the March edition of AHSA Queensland. Welcome not only our local people, but visitors from interstate and other friends. Next month we're planning to have our meetings at Archerfield Airport again. We're intending to use live meeting and have real people obviously talk to each other properly. Because the guest speaker tonight is Robert Heathwood, who will be delivering his presentation, The Flying Padre, Recollections of Outback Pastoral Flying. And next month's topic will be The Empire Has an Answer, about the Empire Air Training Scheme. Well, there's not much else to talk about tonight, so I think we'll hand over. I'll give it over to you, Peter, to our Zoom master. Bye.
Righto, Robert, all yours, mate.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you for the invitation to speak about my aviation experiences. I'd like to acknowledge the aims of your distinguished society. Nothing excites me more than to read about our Australian aviation history. As a member of Number 23 Squadron Association, I deeply appreciate the fascinating history of aviation in our nation. I've been able to observe and be part of both general as well as military aviation. I ponder this. As a nation, apart from a period in Darwin, Broome and many other towns in Northern Australia from February 1942 to November 1943, we have been blessed to have never fought a war on our own soil. Having visited battlefields and museums in Europe and Asia that remind us of the devastation and pain that war can have on a country, we can only thank God that we have never had to experience anything like this within our own shores. Being able to see from the air, a small patch of it, this land has truly been blessed. God has blessed us. Where else in the world would we rather live? It could rightly be said that my aviation experiences are historic, as I finished intentional flying as part of my job at the end of 1988 in Cloncurry. Although I have a good friend, Ron Unwin, who has made and flown a J160 Jabiru, in which we did a lot of flying together. He's now in the process of building an Aeropup, a two-seat recreational aircraft with fold-back wings. You will remember that 1988 was our bicentenary with that wonderful World Expo on our South Bank. In Cloncurry, we opened John Flynn Place. After some 8 years of constant flying, it was time to have a break. I was close to accumulating some 3,000 hours. I sought to be received as a chaplain in the RAAF. I was accepted and marched into RAAF base Townsville at the end of November 1988. My talk will be divided into three sections. Climbing into the high calling of aviation, the joy and challenges of real flying, and promotion to the apex of aviation. Climbing into the high calling of aviation. In a real way, my desire to fly had its beginnings in Archerfield, way back in 1948, when I was 6 years of age. My parents took me on an ANA DC-3 flight to Mackay from here. As I was the only child on board, the hostess asked if I'd like to meet the captain and sit in his seat. This I did. And when he put his cap and headphones on me, I was hooked. From that moment as a little boy, I decided then that I would one day fly. I had a vital religious experience in my late teenage years that set me on the path to all this future adventure. I sought a relationship with our Heavenly Father through his Son Jesus. Just as Jesus accepted others and reached out, I wanted the same attitude, to gladly reach out to help and serve. I could have stayed safe and comfortable. Many in my family counselled me on this, but I knew I was called to a higher challenge. May I share some scripture sentences which are foundational to me in all this. From Psalm 27, one thing I asked of the Lord that I will seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. In Matthew 4:19, come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. In Romans 8, we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. And we cannot overlook the words for aviators, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Isaiah 40, verse 31. My first placement as a probationary Methodist minister was in Blackhall in 1966. And there I got to know a young pilot, Harley Hopkins, who took me on his regular runs as a courier in a Piper Cherokee. That desire, or that stirred in me the earlier desire to fly 18 years before, and I began to sense a call to ministry and aviation in the outback through effective visitation to remote places separated by vast distances by the use of an aircraft. Sadly, years later, Harley died in an aircraft crash from an unrecoverable flat spin. I obtained a student's pilot's license when I entered theological college. Unfortunately, it was beyond me financially, but the dream was not extinguished. It ignited again in 1977 when I was placed in Gympie Uniting Church, and I was mentored by a veteran World War II pilot, Spencer Bell, who flew Mosquitoes and continued to fly for the rest of his life. He encouraged me to join him and begin flying a glider at the Leichhardt Soaring Club at Gympie Airport. I did, and I can say that I had 279 crash landings, accumulating 30 hours in Blannick, Astaire, and M100 Morelli gliders over the next couple of years. Crash landings? Well, in a glider, you must land. Gliders cannot add power if they won't make the touchdown zone. It may seem like a simple concept, but glider pilots are trained to judge their approach so they don't land short, and always wait until they're confident that they have the field made before introducing drag through flaps for spoilers. They must all have been safe landings, because here I am to tell you the story. I recall discussions between glider pilots and powered flight pilots as to what is pure flight. Such discussions will never result in a correct answer, but I can say from my own experience that glider flying prepares one well for powered flight. The joy and challenges of real flying. The Queensland Synod of the newly inaugurated Uniting Church in Australia came to know about my dream to fly and covered the cost of my powered flight training at Maroochydore at the end of 1980. I'm very thankful to my church for this. My ab initio training was in a Piper Tomahawk. NavX training was in a Cessna 172. My unrestricted private pilot's license number 0670355 dates from the 25th of February 1981. I obtained my night VMC on the 3rd of August 1983. I began a placement in the North West Queensland Aerial Patrol based in Cloncurry, beginning in 1981, where I experienced 8 years in the footsteps of John Flynn and Fred Mackay, and many of the Padres who followed them. Cloncurry, a place for one of the landing grounds used by Sir Ross and Sir Keith Smith for the great air race of 1919 was mapped out by Hudson Fish. The traditional owners of Cloncurry area are the Mitakuti, Kalkadoon, Yallana, and Walluwarra and Pitta people. Here they lived for thousands of years until the first known Europeans to come through the area were Burke and Wills in 1861, as they passed through on their ill-fated expedition to the Gulf of Carpentaria. Burke named the river Cloncurry for his cousin, Lady Elizabeth Cloncurry in Galway County. 6 years later, Ernest Henry discovered Cloncurry's mineral riches. The town was named after the river. Cloncurry Airport has been the focal point for many of Australia's greatest innovations. As you know, Cloncurry was involved with the beginnings of Qantas in 1920, and the original Qantas hangar is still in use, the aerodrome, where Queensland and Northern Territory aerial service is still displayed above the hangar door. We who know the facts like to say that Qantas was conceived in Cloncurry, born in Winton, and grew up in Longreach. Qantas flew its first passenger from Longreach to Cloncurry on the 2nd of November 1922. The Royal Flying Doctor Service began its operations in Cloncurry in 1928, and the town was then the arrival point for the first Qantas paying passenger flight. A visit to John Flynn Place Museum and Art Gallery will open the eyes of any budding historian to the richness of Cloncurry's history. Here they have a rogues gallery with pictures of some of the characters who've been part of the fabric of its history. Having placed me as the flying Padre in Cloncurry, the aircraft I started with was a 1965 Beechcraft Musketeer. This was the Beechcraft Super 3 Musketeer A2324. It had a 200 horsepower Lycoming IO360 fuel-injected power plant. It had been acquired by my predecessor, the Reverend Dennis Robinson, who was the originator of the aerial patrol from 1974 onwards. I have to say that I felt it loved the ground too much. After landing on a station strip, the fuel-injected engine did not want to start. I learned how to trick it through application of fuel pump, mixture and throttle. The book says that it needs 950 feet ground roll and 1,380 feet over a 50-foot obstacle. Out there, I was sure the property strips were designed for Cessna 182s, and the Musketeer was just not suitable. But I flew it for 4.5 years, accumulating 1,273 hours. I was to traverse an area stretching from Boulia to the Northern Territory border, then north to the Gulf of Carpentaria, taking in Mornington Island, then east to Corumba, then south to Hughenden. What is the ministry of a flying Padre? Well, it's not being a Bible basher who tries to convert people. The people of the outback are a tough breed who can quickly spot a religious nut and not let you in. I found that it took time for people to get to know me and see that I was there for them in good times and bad times. Let me share an experience. It was in the middle of a drought. I was visiting a cattle station and as normal, buzzed the homestead to announce my arrival. The owner and his offsider came out to meet me at the strip. He apologised that he could not stay and talk as they had to drive around and check their bore dams as he'd heard reports of some rain. I asked, how long would it take? He said it would take the rest of the day. I offered to fly them around. They jumped into the Beechcraft and 40 minutes later, we were back on the ground having checked all the bores. Being with them, showing practical support is the ministry I offer. One more example. The manager and his wife of Lawn Hill Station near Burketown asked if I would baptise their baby girl. It so happened that a photographer from National Geographic magazine wanted to come with me as they were preparing an article on Queensland. He took copious shots and one ended up in. As you see, there's a different way of doing things in the outback. Baptisms and weddings are done in the strangest of places. George, the father in this, was baptised by Padre Les Mackay, son baptised under the same tree. It was a great occasion. And permit me one more story. I was home in the manse when a man called seeking the use of our church trestles. As I helped him lay them, I asked, what for? Oh, to lay out film for a movie being made, he said. He thought it would not come to much. It had a silly name, Crocodile Dundee. It probably put Australia on the map like no other. In my flying in the outback, I had several incidents from which I learned a great deal. Here's one. I departed the monument, a phosphate mine southwest of Mount Isa, where we had a front services nurse. With her and the General Secretary on board, we went to a health conference. The plan was to be back from Julia Creek, following the VFR requirement of being on the ground 10 minutes before last light. I noted there was a smoke haze. On my return, as I searched for the strip, the smoke haze was making it difficult to find things on the ground. I had to make a decision. I passed over a road of a property I knew and decided I would put the musketeer down on it while I had enough light. I did a precautionary search of the road, and although the wheels of the beach fitted the tracks, there was a build-up in between them. No doubt they were very anxious. Radioed Isa of my intention and set myself to the task of flying. We came in on final, over the fence, flaps down as slow as possible. She settled on the ground and the nose wheel lowered into the middle dust build-up. Braking, she came to a stop safely. I radioed Isa. There was great relief everywhere. They alerted the Monument Township and the search party departed. Communication with Isa was on the ground. On the ground could only be by HF, and I was concerned the battery would die. So I would start the engine to recharge it. Eventually, we saw lights, and hours later, we were rescued. Next morning, Delta Yankee Alpha, with only me on board, lifted off the ground easily. I had to report to flight service at ISA and then fill out a report. An article appeared in the next CASA Airworthiness Bulletin on this incident, criticising me for poor planning in the smoke haze, but acclaiming me for making a quick decision to land while I had adequate light. Flying around the Gulf provides many great experiences. One is witnessing a phenomenon that occurs in the Gulf of Carpentaria, usually about October. It's known as the morning glory. It's a cylindrical cloud that can be up to 1,000 kilometres long. The cloud often travels very fast. Glider pilots love them. My son and I were camped on an airstrip at Gulf property when one hit us. Picked up our tents and sleeping bags and other camping gear and blew them across the runway. Just as well that I had tied the aircraft to stakes on the ground. I could regale you with other stories. What of the Musketeer? It still flies today, 57 years of age, the loving care of its new owner. The correct aircraft. Some of you may have seen the ABC Backroads program last year on Cloncurry. The plane you saw in that program is the one we raised money to buy from various sources, such as Donated Drum and Coach Safaris. Upon my recommendation, the Queensland Synod bought it from the local grazier in 1985. It was dedicated by the moderator, Reverend Eric Moore, the same spot, Cloncurry Airport, that the first flying doctor medical flight departed from to bring back a wounded stockman at Julia Creek in 1928. We stand in the shadow of a wonderful tradition. It was the correct aircraft for use out there. One could confidently use it on the challenging property strips, a place for my office, giving shade for a light-hearted chat or a subject more serious. I would stay out on patrol for a week, up to a week at a time. Visits to the remote parts by a Padre, not there to sell them something, I believe, heartened people. Promotion to the apex of aviation. After 8 years of exhilarating life flying in the outback, did I really want to go back to the normal life of a minister in the city? I saw a challenge in military chaplaincy, and of course the Air Force is the only service I felt drawn to. To me, it was promotion to the apex of aviation. So enlistment started along with the required health standards. I had to lose much weight. My doctor guided me through this process. Enlisting from Cloncurry, my first posting as a flight lieutenant chaplain was at RAAF Townsville, arriving in November 1988. Here, I served for 2 years. The 5th Army Aviation Regiment was formed in Townsville on 20th of November 1987 to operate the S-70A-9 Black Hawk and the UH-1 Iroquois helicopters, previously operated by the RAAF. These assets were transferred to the Australian Army. The RAAF CO was Sir Angus Houston, our future CDF, who encouraged me to pay visits to the regiment. During a visit, an offer was made for me to accompany an exercise in the bush where we abseiled to the ground from a Black Hawk. Being a green chaplain who had just been received into the RAAF, I could not understand why on the cable to the ground I spun all the way down, getting quite giddy. The loadmaster apologised that he should have advised me to spread eagle my legs. While at Townsville, I was attached to Point Cook for officer training. I turned 47 while there and found it rather hard to keep up with my course made up of 20-plus-year-olds. But I completed it and returned to Townsville. RAAF Townsville was an exciting and rewarding posting. One day we had a bomb scare on the base. We were asked to report anything suspicious. I noticed a square object on the grass in front of the chapel and I advised security police, and they all came rigged up in protective gear. Cautiously, they approached the object. We waited anxiously. Then, with smiles and laughter, they identified the object as a pooper scooper that had by a dog handler. I would have Sunday chapel services to which uniformed and non-uniformed people would come, and this would always be followed by a cuppa. Ceremonial occasions require the presence of a chaplain, such as the blessing of the colours. The chaplain, as always, was called upon to say grace at both sergeants' and officers' dining-in nights. These were occasions when we would solemnly remember traditions and members who served, especially those sacrificially. These were great occasions when there would be banter and good shared comradeship. In December 1990, I was posted to Butterworth, Malaysia. While there, I flew a few times with PC-3 crews, time surveillance in the area from the North Indian Ocean via the Andaman Sea to the Straits of Malacca and the South China Sea. It is known as Operation Gateway, which was established in February 1981, is based out of Butterworth, Malaysia, under the provisions of the 5-power defence arrangements. Another amazing experience. A request was received by the CEO of RAAF Subat to scatter ashes of a previous serving member over the Indian Ocean. As chaplain, I was tasked with this, scattering the ashes from a PC-3 Orion. As the aircraft neared the coordinates requested, myself and a few officers conducted a brief ceremony, and a small canister containing the members' ashes was expelled down the sonobuoy tube. I was then posted to Amberley from mid-1993 to the end of 1996. The chaplains are called very sad occasions. My Catholic colleague, Paul Goodland, and I were called upon to partially care for families of aircrew who died in the 1993 Gyra crash. The military funeral at Amberley of the crew of the F-111 A8-127 of one squadron was a large ceremony. The OC offered us a flight in an F-111C as a result of our work over this tragedy. One squadron flying program for that day is this: 31st of March 1994, aircraft A8-148, call sign Buck 22, pilot Nev O'Donnell, take off 1500 hours, duration 0.3 hours. The briefing for this flight commenced at 10:45 hours. I was posted at Townsville again, and this was my last posting in the Permanent Air Force. On this posting, an LAC who had joined a writers group in Townsville had written about the crash of a Hudson in the Hinchinbrook Channel. He asked me to proofread his book, Hinchinbrook Channel, A16-162 and the Royal Australian Air Force by Paul D. Padre. This Hudson bomber of 32 Squadron crash landed in mangroves in the Hinchinbrook Channel during a storm. It had been performing patrol during the Battle of the Coral Sea. Members of the 17th Field Engineers who were training in the Cairns and Tablelands region at the time can be seen preparing to pull the damaged aircraft up the beach and load it onto trucks and take it back to Townsville from Cardwell. After reading his book, I approached the OC asking if we should memorialise this event. He agreed, and so we put in motion plans to have a commemoration and unveiling of a plaque at the Battle of the Coral Sea Park on the 7th of May 1997, the 55th anniversary of the crash. Peter Dunn writes about this in his Oz at War. Mention was made in the service, acknowledging the selfless actions of one of the crew, Sergeant Geoffrey Fletcher, and the people of Cardwell in the rescue of the crew. The pilot, Alwyn Samuel, in his 90s, as well as families of the crew, made it to the service. Following the service at Cardwell, we went on to the TULLY Cemetery to commemorate the loss of Sergeant Graham Stanley James. Here, we heard a fascinating story. A Tully mother who had lost her son in battle overseas decided to adopt Sergeant James and regularly placed flowers on his grave. Another amazing activity I was involved in was the funeral service in 1997 for 7 victims of the crash in January 1945 of Bristol Beaufort A9 106 in the mountains near the village of Bugai, Lay District, Moreau Province. Beaufort A9 106 with 7 crew went missing when on a transit flight between Milne Bay and Madang, 500 miles to the northwest. We flew here in a Herc from Townsville that had been set up with airline seating for the families, landed at Nadzab Airport, or Lay. I remember the 42-kilometre trip into Lay along a road that had potholes big enough to swallow the Land Cruisers. They have now got a new highway. In 1997, remains of 3 aircrew and 4 passengers were recovered and buried at the Lay War Cemetery. During this posting to Townsville, my last permanent Air Force posting, I was offered a flight in a Mackie. This aircraft was used for training pilots from basic to advanced stages, as well as having a secondary attack capability. The Navy and the Air Force acquired about 100 of these aircraft. After discharge from the PAF in January 1998, I joined the Specialist Reserve in 23 Squadron Amberley and had several attachments around the nation. In conclusion, in a few weeks, I will turn 80. And as I look back and consider all that I've been able to see and experience in the world of aviation, I sense how blessed I am for the journey that has been mine. That spark that occurred in my mind as a 6-year-old ignited into a wonderful flame of adventure that has brought me great satisfaction and, I trust, appreciation for the service I offer. Today, I keep that flame burning through flying of a different category, remote control. It doesn't matter if you crash, fix it or buy a new one. I'm a member of Number 23 Squadron Association, the senior Southeast Queensland Air Force Association, with its history as the first squadron to move to Queensland, dating back before I was born to Archerfield in August 1939. Our association values the history of 23 Squadron's contribution to the defence of Australia. Here at Lowood, we dedicated 23 squadron memorial plaques, and we had as our guest the president of the USAF 80th Fighter Squadron Headhunters Association, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McNeice, representing the USAAF 8th Pursuit Fighter Group at Lowood in March 1942. It will be 80 years this year since they trained and went forward in our defence. In these ways, we continue to have pastoral involvement with the squadron's family's history. It is interesting that 23 Squadron was the parent squadron, giving birth to number 6, 24, 26, 32, 75, and 76 squadrons. Last year, we planned an event at Archerfield, 23 Squadron's first home in Queensland, to mark the 100th anniversary of the RAAF and celebrate the contribution made by its members in the defence of the nation. It was a dinner show in the Qantas hangar to take time to remember, to be part of the RAAF centenary celebrations. But due to COVID-19, it was postponed until May this year. We would like to invite you to join with us in this celebration. As you know, we are the City of Brisbane Squadron Association. It is fitting that we'll be graced by the presence of the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, Adrian Schrinner, and his wife, Nina. So you see on that slide the details. If you wish to pursue it, book a position there, go to the site at the bottom, it says trybooking.com. So folks, once again, thank you for letting me share my story.
Thank you, Robert. That was very good.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Are there any questions?
Yep.
Yeah, just before you finish, if I could just make a public thanks for the kindness of the people of Concurry and Robert when we flew from Darwin to Adelaide for the centenary of the Smith flight. It was really wonderful. Lovely place to visit. I can recommend it. And the Flynn Museum is something out of the box.
Sure is. It's called the Friendly Heart of the Northwest.
Indeed.
Indeed it is. Yes, I think I may have been there that day, and I cannot believe how many aircraft were parked on Curry Airfield at that time.
Robert, can you hear me? Robert,
yes.
I understand you spent some time as a chaplain at Amberley. I can't remember quite the years, but I had a close relationship with Peter Playford or Playfair. Not sure what the name was.
Peter Playstead.
Stead, that's right. Yes, and also my cousin, equally a RAAF chaplain, Avery, Russell Avery.
Yes.
Did you meet Russell at all?
I think so. I met so many in my time, and they would come into the chaplain's office and we'd shake hands and we'd have a coffee together. And over that period of my life at Amberley, on the base there at Amberley, it was just such a happy time. It really was. The sadness of to have that terrible accident of the Gyra crash.
Tell me, is Peter Playstead around?
Peter has passed away. Yes, sadly passed away a few years ago now.
So is my cousin too. Thank you. I did enjoy the delivery.
I thoroughly enjoyed the talk, and it was fascinating to see your life story of flying around as a chaplain and all the amazing things that you were able to experience doing that. I really enjoyed that. Thank you for your talk today.
Thank you. I have tried to put writing the experiences. They sit on my hard drive at the moment. I haven't published anything, but I'm sure I could interest lots of people with some of the stories that I had. Just absolutely a fortunate life, a wonderful, wonderful, fortunate life. One of the funny occasions I had was, can I share this, Peter?
Yeah, go for it.
Right. One of the funny occasions I had was there was a Catholic nun, and she was a dear soul. She was a sister of St. Joseph, Sister Jane. And I was going to visit a station just over the Northern Territory border. And she had said to me, "Oh, Padre, we'll be very careful there. I'm not too sure about their hygiene. Yeah, I'd be very careful if you do go there and pay a visit. They're pretty rough." Anyway, I thought I'd go and pay a visit and trust that it would work out. Got in there and the men were all out mustering. But she said, the wife, she said, "Look," she said, "they won't be far away. Come in and have something to eat. They'll be turning up soon." So she sat me at the table and I looked into the kitchen, and the kitchen was blackened, inside the kitchen, corrugated iron. And over the big fireplace, there was a huge cauldron, and bubbling away in that cauldron was corned meat, potatoes, onions, all the vegetables bubbling away. And I'm thinking to myself, she's offering me something to eat, but surely to goodness, there'd be no germs in that. They'd be all dead by now.
Yeah.
So she put this plate of corned meat and vegetables on the table, and it was a long trestle table, and there were just stools to sit on. And she said to me, enjoy this, and they'll be in soon. So I'm eating away, and it was quite tasty. And a chook came from outside, as the chickens normally did. They roamed around the stockman's feet, waiting for a morsel to eat. And this chook jumped up onto the seat, then jumped up onto the table, and I could see it coming down the table from one end, and it skidded right through my plate of corned meat and cabbage and everything else, skidded through that, and that went all over the table. And she was so apologetic as she put the meat and the vegetable back on my plate for me to eat. What an experience I had. So, okay, it was just good fun. But those sort of things happened to me in my life out there in the bush. And, whilst I never complained about it, of course, but the next time I visited her, she mentioned that. And it was a way in which she felt confident that she could talk to me, because I never flew, criticised, or did anything about it. Great experience.
Yeah. Well, did you get stomachache after that?
No stomachache. No, everything was okay. I did ask. Okay, did she put that chook in the pot too? I'd like to see that. But those were similar sort of experiences that I had, and we would laugh when we recount these things. And my padres that came after me and served before me, all of us have these tremendous stories to tell about the people out there, the people of the outback. They're just gems of the earth. They really are.
Any other
Good,
questions?
just for it. I noticed you had the 182 with a 3-bladed prop. But that has a standard 235 horsepower engine or a more powerful engine as well?
No, that one, Warwick, it started off with a 2-bladed prop. The IO, I don't know what it would have been, the engine in that 360. Anyway, they graded it up. They put the IO 550 in it, and then they put the 3-bladed prop on, put large wheels on it to handle the fairly rough trips. Yes, they were rough strips. And so that aircraft today, it's just a joy to fly in. I was in it just recently and we had it full of fuel, full of people, full of luggage, no worries. Just handled so well. Yeah. Big engine though, I reckon really performs well. And of course it increased in speed, quite a bit of speed too.
Yeah, Lloyd Knight's got a question.
Yeah, hi.
Hello, Lloyd.
Fabulous talk, Robert. Thank you very much for that. I don't suppose you ever bumped into another Robert Andrew Bob McIntosh.
Yes. He was in the West. Was he? Did he fly Sabres in the Air Force?
Yes. And when he left there, he became a Uniting Church minister.
And then he served. I think he was out of Meekatharra.
Yeah, Meekatharra. So you have heard from him? Yeah.
Yes, I met him. Yes, we would have Padres conferences, and the Padres would come from all over Australia to meet in a place. And I did meet him. I think it was in Alice Springs we met.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, he's fantastic. We're on the same pilot course, and he's my best buddy. And yes, he saw the light and became a minister after he left. He died a few years ago now. He had retired to Adelaide with his wife Jenny.
Yes.
He's still going strong. Thank you.
You too.
I can't find the button to ask a question.
I can hear you, Roderick.
Right. Did you use the facilities of Radio School of the Air at all as part of your ministry?
I did. Yes, I did. We would do brief church services. I would go into Mount Isa, the School of Air Mount Isa, and the people that wanted to listen in just switched on, and I would do a brief worship service over the School of the Air radio. One other thing, Roderick, was in the aircraft, I had installed the channel for the Flying Doctor service, so that when I was departing Cloncurry, I would give my departure call to Mount Isa Flight Service. Then I'd switch over to the Flying Doctor and I would give them a departure call. I'm out of Cloncurry and my flight plan where I was going to, what particular station, what particular township. And time to time, those folk who were listening in knew that I was around the area and would just say, if I did have time, would I be able to drop in? So I did that, yes. School of the Air and with the folk there and listening to the kids. And then on the stations, I went in on the stations, I'd go in and listen to the kids talking on the School of the Air. They were great experiences.
The other interlink then, as I'm just reminded as you speak, the Department of Health, which is not the Flying Doctor, Department of Health ran a fleet of doves in that same general area. Did you interwork because of your pastoral work?
Just explain again what they did.
The Department of Health had a whole fleet of doves which ran services through that general region, the Gulf country. Now, that's not Flying Doctor. So I don't know quite their community health, I think. But did you have to work with them as part of your pastoral care?
Yeah, that's the Northern Territory Aerial Medical Service, operated by the Commonwealth Government and operated for the Commonwealth Government by TAA. I flew 2 years on doves out of Alice Springs and later on a year with nomads. But that primarily Northern Territory, we used to go into the north of South Australia and the northeast corner of Western Australia. But the Flying Doctor Service did the stuff over in Queensland.
Okay,
and
thank you.
The Aerial Medical Service was only Aerial Medical Service in Northern Territory and Gove. In Alice Springs, there was also a Flying Doctor Service, and they did medical evacuations mainly, whereas the NTAMS did concentrated more on routine medical visits, plus evacuations if we happen to be the nearest in the area or the RFTS wasn't available. It was really interesting flying.
Yes, yes, I'm sure it would be. You would have all heard of the Reverend Fred Mackay, the successor to John Flynn, who was the superintendent of Frontier Services.
Yep.
He would come to Cloncurry because he was a Padre in Cloncurry way back in the 1930s, and would come to Cloncurry while I was there through the 80s as we were getting ourselves ready for the building of John Flynn Place, the bicentenary project in Cloncurry. And I would take Fred out with me to visit the stations that and the places, townships, etc. In the had with me. I could not get over how he could where the windmill was, where the milk shed was, where outhouses were, on the properties we visited. I remember it was here, and I remember his memory was amazing. And one time with Fred, we went into Gregory, just south of Burketown, southwest of Burketown, and the strip beside the pub. We landed there, and we walked across the road into the pub, and here we were in the pub having lemonade, of course, I was flying. Fred might have had a beer, I don't know. And there was a stockman there, sitting there having a beer in the pub. And anyway, we introduced ourselves to the publican. The stockman overheard us and he said, "You're not the Fred Mackay, the successor to John Flynn, are you?" And he said, "Well, I am. Indeed, I am." And the man says, "Well, John Flynn baptised me." Anyway, he had in his truck brand new Cobra stockman's hat, big, tall stockman's hat. And he brought it in and he said, "I want to give this to you, Fred, because I'm just so thankful for this opportunity to meet you." And Fred tells the story of when he got home in Sydney. As he came out of the plane, his dear wife, Meg, she did not recognise him in this big 10-gallon hat. She didn't recognise him, but what a story, what a story. Those moments with Fred Mackay, they were just wonderful times.
It would have been. Okay, no other questions? No, I might stop the recording. Thanks very much, Robert. That was fantastic.